Welcome back to the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm the founder of the Empower Grief Journey podcast and coaching platform. Today, we're going to be doing a mini podcast with one of the authors in the anthology book coming out on Sunday, November 23rd. The anthology is called The Empower Grief Journey 23 Stories of Grief That Carved a New Path Forward. And today's author highlight is with Talya Pardo Ricardo. Her chapter is number 14 in the book, and it's called Ashes into Gold: An Alchemy of Anger and Grief.
Mm.
And this was a really powerful chapter and perspective to put in the book. And I want to share the book with you guys real quick so you guys can take a look at it. Beautiful cover. And Talia's chapter sheds light on a topic that I personally have gone through a lot in my life, but other people do too. And we just don't talk about it and hold space. And what it's really about is how we work through anger and what anger is really trying to show us and communicate to us. Because contrary to what society has taught us about anger, I do think anger is actually something that guides us and something that pushes us in our path where we need to go. And Talia does a really good job of communicating that through the story in her chapter. And so, Talia, I want to welcome you onto the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. So honored and really grateful to be in your sphere and to be working with you and to be a part of this book. It's really been an incredible experience.
Well, I loved your chapter in particular because you talked a lot about breaking generational curses. And I absolutely love that. I was very empowered by that when I read through your chapter. And I love that you talked about your story, and I'll have you share that in a second, but just how you navigated through your life and eventually got to that point of saying, wow, I'm carrying something forward that's not serving me. And it wasn't even mine to begin with. And you were able to make all these huge changes in your life that have made you the beautiful person that you are today. So I love that you're willing to talk about anger in such an open space and very raw and very vulnerable to show other people it's not something that we need to run away from or be scared of. And so, building off of that, I want to ask you to share a brief background of your story and tell us about the chapter in the book.
Thank you. Yeah, so my chapter focused really on the anger that I expressed as a mother, the experiences that I had. So I grew up in a household where, there was a lot of explosions. There was never any repair. There was never any talking about it afterwards. It was just kind of like in the moment, lots of yelling, lots of screaming between my parents, at us. And that was what was modeled for me. I didn't really know how to process any emotions. All emotions kind of ended up being expressed as anger. I didn't know how to talk about it. I just knew how to yell in the moment and then, try to recuperate and then kind of move forward, but always moving forward feeling badly about myself, feeling badly about how I yelled, not even being able to really make rational sense of even what had happened because often it would just be this instantaneous trigger and explosion. And that's what I experienced towards me. And then that's what I took on. And I ended up married to a man who was very similar type, very volatile. Our relationship was very volatile. And then I had children, and there was still nothing along the way that showed me a different way. And that marriage itself was a very difficult marriage. My husband was a substance abuser. There was just a lot of stress around, and everything fell on me. And all of a sudden, I had these babies to take care of. And I was overwhelmed and had no other tools to deal with the normal overwhelm that comes with being a working parent, little babies who don't always cooperate with what you want to do or what you need to do. And I would explode on them too. I would yell, I would get very frustrated. That's saying it nicely. As they got a bit older, I mean, it's not just yelling, it was berating, it was really raging and ranting. And it's hard to express that, to admit that. I feel terrible admitting that. And at the same time, I feel like I really have to be honest all the time about how how extreme it got, in that sense. I know it would ruin a whole day if we would start off in the morning and something would set me off. I know we all felt it throughout the rest of the day. My kids would come home, my daughter would say, "Mommy, I'm sorry for the problems this morning." Like it stayed with all of us and made us just all feel sad and bad about ourselves and contributed to this disconnect that I didn't really understand at the time because was so not self-aware. I was just kind of on this autopilot of this is how I am, this is how I do things. Didn't even consciously say that. And it started to come to a point where after my divorce, I was a single mom, and again, continually overwhelmed with no real tools, lots of support, but no verbal engagement from anyone else to say, like, I think, maybe you can handle this differently. Let's talk about why you're so upset about this, or what is it about this that set you off with the kids. And something would start to kind of stir in my mind after I'd explode on the kids. I'd know it wasn't right. I'd feel bad, but I wouldn't know how to shift that. I would feel like I was lost in these loops where I would just start to almost watch myself in these rages and getting angry with the kids, and then almost not even be able to understand, well, like, okay, well, I'm done, let's move on because now we have to go do this, or like, honey, come give me a snuggle, or it's bath time, or whatever. And I started to see their reluctance to get back into kind of a normal space. And all of this started to sink in, but almost like on the side. Like it would occur to me and I'd be like, I still don't know what to do about that. Or, I didn't have the equipment, the emotional equipment to even address that, because also what it would then touch on is my guilt and shame, because I would be realizing these things. Then I'd feel ashamed because I know it's my behavior, but I just couldn't get there. And there was one day, and I say this in my chapter, where my daughter, bless her, my older one, she is fiery, fiery like me, and really a tough cookie. And there was a day I was arguing back with her, and she just yelled back at me. And it was like something snapped, and it was like, how are you yelling at me? What are you doing? Oh my God, that almost sounds like things that I've yelled at you. Like that sounds like me. And that was really the opening where I realized, like, it's not just this loop that I'm caught in where I'm upset and I don't know how to control myself, but now I'm seeing this effect on my children. I'm losing the connection with them, and they're behaving like me. That mirrored to me how bad my behavior was. What kind of an example was I setting? And that really set me on the path of being determined to find ways to do better, right? I had already been working with mentors, post divorce. I was trying to find myself and, explore who I was after my marriage. But this added another angle to it where I knew I needed to find a way to behave better, basically, express myself better, control those angry reactions so that I could interact with my children in a healthier way. And, it's been a few years of working on it, because nothing happens overnight when you have a full lifetime of these learned and ingrained reactions, very little self-awareness. It takes time to kind of unpack it, because it's not just one thing that will always set off the anger. There's so many different layers to it, that takes time to work on and be ready to face, and integrate into your understanding. And then again, also practice. That's part of it too. It's a tangible, practical practice that you have to build an awareness of how you're feeling in the moment, and implement tools that you can do to divert those reactions. So all of that has brought me to a place where I experienced some career changes over the last few years, and it became really important to me to want to help others in the way that I've been helped and supported by the mentors that I've worked with, because I know all these years talking about anger isn't something that I ever wanted to do before. That would be like shameful, and I'd present this lovely and happy and vibrant image to everybody else around me. But as my daughter would told me a couple of times, she'd be like, "But mommy, when you yell, you're like, it's like I can't even believe you're still the same mommy." So it's something that we hide and we try to hide away, and I did too. And in coming to do this work and becoming certified as an anger management specialist and really wanting to help others, I realized we really have to be so radically self-honest about it, without shaming ourselves or judging ourselves, but saying, like, this is how I behaved because I didn't have those tools then. And that's the reality, and that's okay. What is really important is that now you have the awareness, now you can build those tools and start to change things. And I see the results of it in my relationships with my children now, where we have this wonderful connection. They come to me and they share things about their lives. They're teenagers. And when teenagers, like, often it's harder to talk to teenagers at that stage, but I find that they really come to me with friends, school, things that are bothering them. So I feel like I've at least been able to turn the tide from where we were headed before.
Well, I think that's just such a beautiful story because I've worked in the mortgage business for 8 years and I worked with lots of families, people with anywhere from one child to seven. And when
Mm,
you're trying to raise a family, and even in your story where your spouse ended up going through a work accident and then going through substance abuse and being in their own volatile state, that's a lot to handle. It's a lot to manage.
yeah.
And a lot of times our anger gets exacerbated in that moment. And what I thought you did a great job of in your chapter when I read it was that anger was not coming from a place of vindictiveness or vengefulness or
Mm,
a lot of these places people see anger coming from. What I really saw it from was a cry for help. It was a cry for help of, I don't have the resources or the tools or the skills to handle what's going on right now in my life. I'm drowning. I feel like I'm in a pool with 50-pound weights tied to my feet. I'm trying to get a breath of air before I go down. That's what I saw was a cry for help. And that's a really powerful thing about anger that a lot of us miss. We see the reaction of anger, we see the outward appearance of it, but what's underneath and behind it is oftentimes a very hurt, very wounded person, or somebody that, by the way, is a big cry for help. They're looking for help,
mm,
is what's behind a lot of that. And I think you just did a great job of showing that. Something else you brought to the chapter is carrying forward the generational curse of things. And when we're taught by our parents, by the way, we're shown in our very early stages of life that, well, this behavior is normal. This is okay. This is just how we deal with things. And we come to find out when we go out into the world and we start growing up and we become teenagers into college, we get into relationships, we get out in the workplace. Sometimes we find out that behavior is actually more harmful than it is good for us. And we don't know any better. That's the whole thing. We don't know any better. And so society puts pressure on us like there's something wrong with us, that there's something screwed up with us. We have a problem that needs to be fixed. And we don't take the time to do what Talia showed in our chapter, which is realizing, where did that come from? Where did I learn these things? Is this actually mine to carry, or was this imposed on me, implanted on me from my growing up? And Talia shows a really beautiful way in her chapter of recognizing that pattern in her family and saying, whoa, I married somebody and carried this thing forward. Now I have children and it's carrying forward. And then she got to this place of saying, this wasn't even mine to begin with. This was actually my family's mentality of things. This is my family's behavior they think is okay, but it's not mine to carry forward. That's not even who I am. I'm actually this person over here. And she shows this beautiful transformation of becoming somebody that began to notice how anger was not her. It was the cry for help. It was I
yeah.
wasn't shown anything to know differently. I wasn't. And so, I think what's hard that you showed Talia, and I've done this through my life as well, because I've struggled with anger in some ways, is we have to reteach ourselves. And you brought up in your chapter that learning out of anger is a lot like picking up a new language. And I love that
Yes.
analogy in the book.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Because if we don't know how to even express it or how to process it, then what comes out? What do we even say? For me, it really was kind of mapping a different, I can say this instead, right? Of the explosion or focusing in on the nitpick of whatever I think set me off and go like, this actually is what I'm disappointed about this, or even this gets me really angry, or this hurts me. But even those words, sometimes we just don't have them because we actually haven't heard them before. And I just want to say also, in terms of generational curses, doing this work really helped me to understand my parents, my grandparents, my grandparents. My father comes from a very turbulent background, much more aggressive and violent, and he passed on some of it, but not the violence, thankfully. So I saw progress with each generation. He passed on a certain element of it, but in learning about myself and learning where it all comes from, and understanding, you know so human beings and how we react to things and how what we grow up with impacts us. I was able to also reflect on my parents and understand, knowing what they grew up with. Okay, well, then I understand why they react this way. And it has seemed to shift so much in our entire family at this point. By breaking it for my children, for the next generation, I feel like I've also had a backward ripple effect because so much of that dynamic has shifted as well. I think I just kind of put a barrier in between and just showed by example a different way of managing myself. And it just seems to have taken hold, and I'm really happy about that. But it just gave a greater understanding for me in terms of what I took on, what I was carrying, why, who they are as human beings, and then what we can do moving forward to shift and offer more support or a new language to express it.
Well, I think, this is a unique part of talking about grief because as we go through grief in our life, and typically grief gets centered around the loss or the death of somebody, but we don't always
Yeah.
talk about grief in these other areas of life. And what I thought was so beautiful about your chapter is that when we do struggle with anger in our life, and I've been one of those people, I'm very vulnerable, as you guys know in this podcast, I've dealt with that a lot growing up. I never understood fully until very much recently that there's a lot of guilt and shame and blame attached to anger. And not a lot of people understand. We see the outward expression of somebody being angry, but we don't always see what happens after the fact, which is most of us who do get angry oftentimes have guilt and shame around it, saying, God, I wish I didn't say that, or I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I had seen that this is what I was really upset about. It wasn't even this, or I was really triggered by X and it led to this. And we end up in this place of just shaming ourselves so much. And that's a really damaging thing, by the way, because we get caught in the cycle that
Yeah.
Talia does talk about in her chapter a bit of saying, like, okay, I recognize it and I see it, but I'm really shameful and guilty about it. And then the cycle repeats itself because we're not giving ourselves space to process and understand what was actually driving that and giving ourselves an actual opportunity to understand the rhyme and reason behind what was going on so that we do have that ability to make a choice not out of guilt and shame or blame, but out of a place of consciousness. And her chapter does such a beautiful job of showing us that if we can walk away from the guilt and the shame and the blame in those moments and really get to the core of ourselves and be authentic with ourselves, be honest with ourselves, that's where we can create that shift when we're in those anger places of life. And that's where I think we break generational curses, we create new patterns in our life. Talia, you did such a beautiful job with that in your chapter.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and you know what shame also reinforces is those limiting beliefs. I mean, that term is so well used, but it's those inner stories that we tell ourselves of like, I'm not good enough. I can't handle this. I never say things the right way. Nobody understands me. So the shame reinforces that belief that we carry within us. And sometimes it's not even a conscious belief. It's just the lens through which we view ourselves and how we interact with the world. And when you maintain that belief system about yourself, you really will always perpetuate those patterns, right? If you always believe that, I'm not good enough or nobody hears me, you're never going to be able to express yourself differently. It's always going to come out in that kind of angry explosion or not really addressing really how you're feeling. So yeah, and shame, it can be crushing, and guilt too. And that's really, I struggled with it because once my awareness grew and I started to see the difference of how I could behave, there were days I would get overwhelmed with memories of how I behaved. And I would look back and I'd be like, I can't believe I did that to my child, or I yelled at her that way. I saw the hurt in her eyes, and that just breaks my heart. And what I've come to understand really is like guilt and shame just means you really care. It shows that you care about who you are, how you show up. It shows that you care about the people that you may impact, right? But the thing is, it then has like a detrimental effect because yes, you care, but it keeps you from taking those more positive steps to really be able to express that or cultivate those connections because it keeps you locked in shame, keeps you in negative patterns, negative beliefs about yourself. So it means you care, you're human, but it also keeps you stuck.
That's very beautifully said. And I wanted to ask you as we're getting close to wrapping up the podcast, a couple things. How do you hope to help people with your story?
Hmm. I hope that anyone who reads my story will maybe feel a little bit of relief and maybe not so bad about themselves to understand that we're all human. We all have different, I guess experiences and that teach us behaviors and not to, I hope that people will come out of reading my story maybe relating a little bit or understanding that it's something that they can be free to talk about or that they shouldn't hide so much or that they're not alone. They're not the only ones who have hurt others with their anger, and also to know that you can change, things can heal, right? So it doesn't just stay there, but also to give them the hope to know that it's never too late to turn around a relationship. It's never too late to deepen a connection and to heal that and to shift the dynamic of how you interact with someone, to let them know that you really love them and you're there to hear them rather than, I guess, aggressively verbally assault them.
Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things of how your chapter ends is that there's so much good and so much positive that came out of this moment of
Yeah.
life that everybody sees was so heavy and so dark that there's light in the other side of it. And it's our ability that we have a choice, by the way, we always do, like you said, we always have an opportunity to deepen a connection, deepen a relationship. We always have an opportunity to change things. What happens in the past and what happens now doesn't always have to affect the future. We can always write a new chapter, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, and then Talia, I just want to ask you another question here. What experience did this project give you, and what did you take away from it after writing your chapter?
Well, I found that it actually is the word intensified? It up-leveled my healing around this story of mine, this part of my story, actually, because it forced me to look to where I am now with my children, to see the progress that we've made, and to recognize that I don't have to stay stuck as that past is not the identifying feature of me and my story. Actually, I've made so much progress and I can recognize I'm a good person. It reinforced all of that to me, and it really made me see so clearly the beautiful relationships I have with my children now. So it gave me back quite a lot to be able to rehash and kind of see the storyline as I wrote it from beginning to where I am now, and remember to focus on where I am now and see the good in that. So it was uplifting to me too.
Well, I want to share with you guys the Empower Grief Journey book is coming out on November 23rd, which is this Sunday coming up. Talia's chapter is number 14. You guys can see it here. It's a little blurry as I'm
Yeah.
recording this, but when the recording comes out, you guys will see it. Um, and then what I'm going to share with you, when you do flip to the back of her chapter, you guys will also see a picture of her with her bio and her links down below with the QR code so you guys can reach out and connect with her. And I recommend that you do. She's a beautiful soul, as you guys will find when you read her chapter. She's going to talk to you guys about a area of life, like I said, society's very scared to talk about, doesn't want to talk about, but it's a part of life that if we address, as you guys heard from Talia today, we can go from these hard places of life where we just didn't have the resources or the know-how to navigate these things and realize that our anger was actually trying to show us something and push us in a direction of where we were supposed to be, and that we can really heal ourselves in so many ways and really break generational curses to become something great in our life. So, Talia, I just want to say a big thank you for coming on the mini cast today and sharing a little bit about your chapter with everybody.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me on today. And it's always a pleasure to speak to you. And thank you for having me be part of this project. It's been an incredible experience.
And I wanted to ask you if people want to connect with you after listening to the podcast today, where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook at Talya Pardo Ricardo. I'm also on Instagram, Phoenix Rising Mentoring, or on my website, phoenixrisingmentoring.com. Those are the main three places you can find me. I'm easily reachable. I've also got my email, phoenixrising5275 at gmail.com, but generally the socials are the best place to start out with me.
Well, I just want to recommend to you guys listening and watching the podcast, reach out and connect with Talia. She's been one person that I've connected with and many throughout the podcast world this year. I consider her a friend. She's taught me a lot of things in areas of life I haven't really dived into much that I'm exploring and doing some healing work on myself. And I can just tell you guys after listening today, she's a very beautiful person who's done a lot of healing work in her life. And I know that she can help a lot of you guys who may feel stuck in grief or maybe going through grief and having a lot of anger attached to certain moments that have happened, help you work through and navigate those things. So definitely reach out to her. She's a wealth of information, and is also a very compassionate person that would be a good fit to walk that journey beside you. I will also have Talia's social media links, her website, her email on the show notes. When you guys get done here, you can reach out to her and connect from there. What I'm going to say with you guys is I'll be back with another mini podcast here soon with another author in the book. But Thank you for joining us today on this mini cast with Talia, and I look forward to talking to you guys again here soon.